So this piece of land was our farm in March of last year, but it could be any piece of land anywhere in the world in an arid or extreme climate. Our region and farming this land, right, it's faced with inefficiency, both in terms of water, yield, just resource utilization, and its ultimate result in foodstuff. Further, this region is plagued with a fast-growing population. Normally that's a good thing, but when you're as food scarce as we are and reliant upon imports, it's a real challenge. People commonly talk about this statistic of roughly 9.5 billion people by 2050 to feed, but rarely do they double-click on where those people are occurring, and of course the food trade dynamics in any given region. This region is growing at over 3%, the population growth rate. And for those of you who ever took a finance class, an intro to finance, if you remember the rule of 72, 72 divided by a growth rate is the time it takes to double. 72 over 3, it's every 20-something years this region will double in population. That's cataclysmic. And especially when in fruit and veg, for instance, a piece of the calorie pyramid, we are importing over 90% of our fresh produce. And that which we produce here, for the first point, we're doing quite inefficiently. It's a real challenge. And when we talk about that 9.5 billion people food challenge, this region will have increasing needs right as the rest of the world does as well, right as we have to feed that extra India and China. And a big piece of that will be here. How do we solve that today? We have a lot of oil wealth, and we export that oil wealth, stabilize currencies in global US dollar denominated food markets, and in doing so we're able to import food and we're able to enjoy really reasonable food security and availability, though admittedly that may not last forever. Today, the consumer is faced with a difficult choice. You have local, lower quality, seasonal fresh produce that's seasonally available, and you have always available, but extremely costly, air freighted imports from places like Europe. This is that same piece of land just 4 months later. We began construction in the end of March, and we began planting in August of last year, when the temperatures outside were reaching 50 and relative humidity exceeding 80%. This is what's possible using technology to control the climate and grow year-round premium quality fresh produce in the desert. And we'll cover this in a moment, but excitingly, it's also economic. Pure Harvest solution is really using the Internet of Things to overcome climate. We have integrated and partnered with technologies from around the world, but largely Holland, which is the world leader in controlled environment agriculture, to amalgamate a system with multiple climate management systems, mechanical, evaporative, high pressure fogging, cooling systems, also specialized glass, specialized air movement technology, and all of this in a perfect concert and orchestra, I would say, to be able to orchestrate that climate. If you see in the bottom picture on the left, that desert outside was the land that you just saw in the very first photo. Those little plants, this is in late August as we had planted and our seedlings were growing and gaining life. We are protected by nature, not by chemicals. We use the best-in-class integrated pest management solutions to grow our food. We also yield over 10 times a traditional field farm, achieving best-in-class and almost world-leading yields because there's an incredible amount of light here and our light efficiency is as high as that of Holland. And next, we use very little water because we're using hydroponic growing and also in what's called a semi-closed system, which is largely closed using very little air movement or with the outside world or air exchange. We're actually able to minimize water consumption. And we are able to price our product at a materially lower cost than comparable quality imports, which you can observe when you purchase this product at Spinney's. It's less than half the cost of the comparable Spanish product from Sanlúcar, which is a world-leading brand. And lastly, we produce year-round, and I'll cover that in this next slide. This is a dashboard of our graphical user interface, if you will. This is our climate management system, but the dashboard you see as our grower is navigating the system. Something I'd like to point out is if you look in the little honeycomb-looking structure on the bottom left, that 29.8 is the temperature on the inside, and just below it, 82, is the humidity on the inside. On the outside, the similar structure shows around 38, and below that, 12. In this case, we are cooling the air and humidifying it before treating the plants. We can do both. We can manage, as you can see, we have sensors on just about everything and are capturing a tremendous amount of information and data, and then using that information to optimize not only the design of the future system, the climate for the existing crop, but then even the performance of the specific crop and the given genetics. We decide which crop is performing best, and we plant more of that in the next planting, which results in higher yields, greater efficiency, and allows us to really create what is a pretty exciting farming opportunity in the Middle East that is resource efficient and local. And this is what I think many of you will find most exciting. This is almost 6 months of climate data performance within our system. On the bottom left, you'll see this is August 8th, the day we planted, and to the right was March 10th, a pretty recent date. As you can see, the green chart is the max and minimum temperatures of outside temperatures, hitting as high as 50 when it was hot, and hitting cold temperatures, which, believe it or not, you need heating, even in the desert in the winters. The inside bar is the one that is the multi-million-dollar opportunity. Once you can use technology to control the climate and keep a Mediterranean climate corridor in the Middle East, you can grow anything. So within this climate corridor of 16 to 32, we can grow tomatoes, capsicum, cucumber, strawberry, aubergine, lettuce, microgreens, herbs, just about anything. And that is what we're doing at Pure Harvest. This is what we spent millions of dollars, tons of research and development, a tremendous amount of support from our technology partners at Holland, some of which are here, to achieve this possibility, and now we've proven it, and now we intend to scale. So back to revisiting the dilemma the consumer faces. Local or the imports, now they have a third alternative, a new market, which is premium quality, European standard fresh produce grown locally and always available. And again, I encourage you all to try samples at the end. We brought them for you to enjoy. And that bottom measurement down there is a Brix measurement. For those of you who don't know, that's a measure of the sweetness or the sugar content of the fruit. We are achieving 10.5, and that product on the bottom right is a Coeur d'Abidjan tomato from France, which is one of the best known and highest priced brands in this market, and we are exceeding their sweetness and quality. So some images on the top right, that's our farm. This is a commercial scale proof of concept, just under 1 hectare. And the others are just images within the greenhouse to show you the incredible flourishing life that is possible inside the greenhouse. If I've learned nothing from growing up in Arizona and now living in Dubai, is that given the right conditions, life can flourish anywhere. And this is some additional images showing, of course, we're using bumblebees for pollination like they do in Holland or Australia or other places around the world. And of course, additional images of the product in the greenhouse. So our aspiration now is to build. We have completed the commercial scale proof of concept. We've sort of perfected the technology and design. It's now to build more of it, to diversify across the region, as well as to increase the number of crops that we offer to consumers and to you, those of you who live in this region. Also, over time, we're going to be tackling inefficiencies that exist in our market, right? We talked about how inefficient existing farming is. Let me talk about an inefficiency we face today. CO2, for instance. We buy our CO2, our food-grade CO2, like what is in your carbonated beverage, from places like Saudi Arabia and places like Kuwait. We're one of the hydrocarbon capitals of the world. Why are we trucking carbon from our neighbors? We want to produce and capture clean CO2 from green sources here, which will both lower our cost structure, improving our competitiveness, but also make us increasingly more sustainable in line with our goal and our vision. And you can see the other projects. There are many opportunities in this space now that we've proven this industry is possible.